The lights of the congressional hearing room blazed down on the witness table where Stephen Miller sat, his pale face illuminated harshly under the fluorescent glow. His thin lips pressed into a tight line as he adjusted his navy tie, projecting confidence before the House Judiciary Committee. The former senior advisor to President Trump had navigated countless heated exchanges before, always managing to deflect and counter with practiced precision, but today would be different. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett sat poised at the committee dais, a stack of documents before her, her expression calm but determined. The freshman Democrat from Texas had been patiently waiting her turn as other representatives lobbed predictable questions that Miller swatted away with rehearsed talking points. Then came the moment that would send shockwaves across political media. As her questioning time began, Crockett looked directly at Miller and asked a single devastating question about immigration policy that left him frozen, mouth partially open, utterly unable to respond. The room fell into stunned silence. For the first time in his political career, the architect of some of the most controversial immigration policies in modern American history had been rendered completely speechless on national television. Within seconds, committee members exchanged glances of disbelief. Republicans shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Democrats leaned forward, hardly believing what they'd just witnessed. Miller's face flushed crimson as he struggled to regain his composure. But the damage was already done. This wasn't just a tough question. It was the question that exposed everything Miller had spent years carefully concealing from the American public. Before diving deeper into this explosive confrontation, make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel so you won't miss our latest political analysis and breaking stories. Now, let's rewind and see exactly how Congresswoman Crockett engineered this career-defining moment that has everyone talking. The June morning had begun like many others on Capitol Hill. The House Judiciary Committee had convened a special hearing on the impact of executive immigration policies on American communities. The Republican-controlled committee had called Stephen Miller as their star witness, expecting him to effectively defend the previous administration's hardline immigration approach while criticizing current policies. Stephen Miller, 38, had built his reputation as the unyielding architect of some of the Trump administration's most controversial policies. With his slick-back hair thinning slightly at the temples and perpetually serious expression, Miller had become known for his combative media appearances and unwavering commitment to restrictive immigration policies. After leaving the White House, he'd founded America First Legal, continuing to push his nationalist agenda while maintaining close ties to conservative power circles. Mr. Miller is perhaps the foremost expert on border security and immigration enforcement in America today, Chairman Jordan had declared in his opening statement, setting the tone for what Republicans hoped would be a showcase of Democratic immigration failures. On the other side of the dais sat Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, 42, the former civil rights attorney who had risen quickly in Democratic ranks since her election to Congress. Known for her sharp legal mind and refusal to back down from confrontation, Crockett had become a powerful voice for progressive policies and accountability. The stakes couldn't have been higher. With immigration once again at the center of national debate ahead of upcoming elections, this hearing would shape the narrative for millions of voters. Republicans needed Miller to effectively frame the border as a crisis of Democratic making, while Democrats sought to expose the humanitarian failures and legal problems with hard-line approaches. What the Republicans hadn't counted on was Crockett's meticulous preparation. For weeks, her staff had been compiling documents, court records, and internal communications. Where other Democrats might have used their 5 minutes for speechifying or predictable questions about family separation, Crockett had developed a different strategy altogether. "I've been watching Stephen Miller operate for years," she had told her staff during preparation. "And he flexes, pivots, and twists facts, but every fortress has a weak point if you know where to look." That weak point was buried in documents that few had connected until Crockett's team mapped the relationships. A trail that linked policy memos directly to Miller, revealing motivations that contradicted his public statements about immigration enforcement being solely about national security and rule of law. Behind the scenes, tension had been building. Just before the hearing, a senior Republican aide had approached Crockett's chief of staff, warning, "Your boss might want to tread carefully today." Miller's prepared for everything. With a knowing smile, the chief of staff had replied, "Not for everything." As Miller finished his opening statement, a 10-minute defense of strict border policies that painted immigrants as threats to American safety and prosperity, the committee room hummed with partisan energy. Republican members nodded approvingly, while Democrats scribbled notes for their questioning. Chairman Jordan turned to begin the questioning. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Davidson, for 5 minutes. As the Republican softball questions began, Crockett reviewed her notes one final time. Her signature purple blazer stood out among the sea of navy and black suits. On her notepad, a single question was underlined twice, the question that would change everything. The room had no idea what was coming, but in less than 30 minutes, Stephen Miller's carefully constructed public image would shatter on national television. The first round of questioning proceeded predictably. Republicans lobbed friendly setups to Miller, allowing him to expound on border statistics and paint apocalyptic pictures of immigration threats. Democrats challenged his assertions with questions about family separation and detention conditions, which Miller deflected with practiced talking points about necessary deterrence and following the law. The previous administration simply enforced laws that Congress itself passed, Miller stated firmly in response to questioning from Congressman Liu of California. If you don't like the outcomes, perhaps Congress should change the laws rather than expecting the executive branch to ignore them. Liu pushed back, but the family separation policy was a deliberate choice in how to enforce. Miller interrupted smoothly. There was never a family separation policy. There was a zero-tolerance prosecution policy for illegal entry, as required by statute. This familiar dance continued, with Miller maintaining his composure and effectively parrying most challenges. He seemed almost bored at times, having rehearsed these defenses countless times on cable news and in previous testimonies. Then came a moment that shifted the energy in the room. Congresswoman Sylvia Garcia from Texas began questioning Miller about internal emails regarding conditions in detention facilities. Mr. Miller, were you aware of the reports from DHS's own medical consultants warning about dangerous conditions for children in these facilities? She asked. Miller's response was immediate. I never received any such warnings, Congresswoman. Those operational details would have been handled by DHS officials, not White House staff. Garcia leaned forward. So you deny having any knowledge of medical experts warning about the risks of your policies to children in custody? As I said, those operational matters were handled by the appropriate agencies following legal requirements, Miller replied, a slight edge creeping into his voice. My role was policy development, not implementation details. From her seat 3 positions down from Garcia, Congresswoman Crockett watched Miller intently. She noted how his right hand tightened slightly on his water glass, a tell she'd observed in previous hearings when he wasn't being entirely truthful. Garcia's time expired before she could follow up, and Chairman Jordan quickly moved to the next Republican questioner, who pivoted to questions about the Biden border crisis and concerns about fentanyl trafficking. Miller relaxed visibly, back on comfortable ground as he cited statistics about drug seizures and criminal arrests at the border. These numbers demonstrate the clear security threat that unchecked migration presents to American communities, he concluded confidently. The tension in the room escalated when Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez took her turn. Rather than asking traditional questions, she presented Miller with quotes from his own emails obtained through FOIA requests. Mr. Miller, you wrote in this email from September 2019, and I quote, "We need to show that there are consequences. Not consequences for breaking laws, just consequences for attempting to seek asylum. Can you explain what you meant by consequences in this context?" Miller's jaw tightened. You're taking that completely out of context, Congresswoman. That discussion was about ensuring our policies didn't create incentives for dangerous illegal crossings that put migrants themselves at risk. That's interesting, Ocasio-Cortez replied, because nowhere in this email chain is there any mention of migrant safety. In fact, the previous email in this thread specifically discusses making conditions in holding facilities more austere as a deterrent. Again, you're mischaracterizing, Miller began, but Ocasio-Cortez continued. I'm reading directly from documents your own government produced, Mr. Miller. These aren't my characterizations, they're your words. For the first time, Miller appeared slightly rattled. His typical poise wavered as he shuffled through his own papers, looking for talking points to counter this line of questioning. The policies we implemented were designed to address a genuine crisis at the border, one that the current administration has only made worse through their lax enforcement. As the back and forth continued, the committee room grew increasingly tense. Republican members began interrupting with parliamentary inquiries and points of order, attempting to disrupt Ocasio-Cortez's questioning as Miller struggled to regain his footing. Chairman Jordan intervened. "The gentlewoman's time has expired. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Florida for 5 minutes." The Republican congressman quickly threw Miller a lifeline, asking about the economic impacts of illegal immigration on working-class Americans, a topic Miller could address with his standard talking points. As this exchange unfolded, cameras caught Congresswoman Crockett exchanging a knowing glance with her staff member seated behind her. She discreetly received a folder containing what appeared to be additional documents, which she reviewed carefully while maintaining an impassive expression. Miller, having regained his composure, was now emphatically describing the unprecedented security threats at the southern border. His confidence had returned, voice firm as he cited statistics about asylum claim denial rates and immigration court backlogs. The system was being overwhelmed by fraudulent claims, he asserted. Our policies were designed to restore integrity to an asylum system being abused by those seeking economic opportunity rather than true protection. The chairman glanced at the time. "The gentlewoman from Texas, Miss Crockett, is recognized for 5 minutes. The room subtly shifted as Crockett adjusted her microphone. Unlike her colleagues, she didn't immediately launch into questioning or statements. Instead, she looked directly at Miller for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Miller returned her gaze steadily, though those watching closely might have noticed a slight tension in his shoulders. Something about Crockett's calm demeanor suggested this wouldn't be a typical exchange. "Thank you, Mr. Chairman," she finally said, her voice clear and measured. "Mr. Miller, I'd like to take a different approach than my colleagues." Miller nodded slightly, ready for whatever standard Democratic attack he assumed was coming. What he didn't realize was that Jasmine Crockett had discovered something none of her colleagues had pieced together. The connection between internal memos, private emails, and public statements that would expose the true nature of policies Miller had always portrayed as being about national security and law enforcement. And in less than 5 minutes, she would ask the one question Stephen Miller had never prepared to answer. "Mr. Miller," Congresswoman Crockett began, her voice carrying clearly through the hearing room, "before I ask my main question, I'd like to establish a few facts." Miller nodded slightly, his posture reflecting the confidence of someone who had successfully navigated most of the hearing. "You've stated repeatedly today and in previous testimonies that the immigration policies you developed were solely motivated by national security concerns and the rule of law. Is that correct?" Crockett asked. "That's correct, Congresswoman," Miller replied smoothly. "Our policies were designed to enforce existing immigration laws and protect American communities." Crockett nodded, maintaining direct eye contact. "And you denied that racial considerations played any role in policy development under your guidance, correct?" Miller's expression hardened slightly. "I have consistently rejected such baseless accusations. Our policies applied equally regardless of country of origin or any demographic factors." "I see," Crockett said, glancing down at her documents. "And you've stated under oath previously that deterrence measures were implemented only to discourage illegal entry, not to punish legitimate asylum seekers." "Yes. The goal was always to discourage dangerous illegal crossings while maintaining legal pathways for those with legitimate claims," Miller responded, the rehearsed answer coming easily. Crockett appeared to consider this for a moment. The room had fallen unusually quiet, with even restless committee members sensing something building in her methodical approach. "Mr. Miller, I have here a series of documents that my office has obtained through multiple FOIA requests and whistleblower disclosures. I'd like to direct your attention to the screen." The large display monitors in the hearing room switched to show an email dated July 2018. The sender's name was redacted, but the recipient was clearly identified as Stephen Miller. This email discusses what the center calls demographic outcomes of various policy options. Crockett noted. Can you explain what demographic outcomes referred to in this context? Miller shifted slightly. Without seeing the full context, Congresswoman, I can't speak to what another person meant in their communication to me. Fair enough, Crockett replied. Let's look at your response then. The screen changed to show Miller's reply. Though partially redacted, key phrases were visible. Preferred option is clearly the one that would result in the maximum reduction from targeted countries, and demographic change has policy implications we should consider. The room tensed perceptibly. A Republican member attempted to interrupt with a point of order, but Chairman Jordan, himself looking concerned, allowed Crockett to continue. Mr. Miller, could you explain what you meant by targeted countries and why their demographic change was a consideration in immigration policy? Crockett asked, her voice steady but pointed. Miller's face tightened. That appears to be referring to countries with high rates of visa overstays and immigration violations. The context was clearly about enforcement priorities based on data, not any demographic targeting. I see, Crockett said. Then perhaps you could explain this memo from your files, dated March 2019. The screen changed again, displaying an internal policy document with Miller's name at the top. A highlighted section read, "Policy success should be measured by overall reduction numbers, with special attention to reductions from key regions that present cultural integration challenges." The hearing room erupted in murmurs. Reporters in the press section began typing frantically on their laptops. Mr. Miller, what exactly are cultural integration challenges? Crockett asked, her gaze unwavering. Miller's composure showed its first significant crack. That language is referring to regions with significantly different civic traditions and legal systems that can make assimilation into American society more challenging. Really? Crockett responded, because in this email chain that followed this memo, you specifically identified countries in Africa, Central America, and the Middle East, not based on their civic traditions, but explicitly based on their racial and religious demographics. Before Miller could respond, Crockett continued, but the most concerning document is this one. The screen changed again to display what appeared to be notes from a policy meeting. Miller's handwriting was visible in the margins, with one note clearly reading, "Permanent demographic impact must be primary consideration. Public messaging should focus on security and laws." A palpable shock rippled through the room. Democratic members stared in disbelief at the evidence being presented. Several Republican members looked visibly uncomfortable. Miller's face had paled considerably. Those notes are being completely mischaracterized. The demographic considerations were about maintaining a balanced and sustainable immigration system, which any nation has the right to. Crockett interrupted him, something she rarely did in hearing. Mr. Miller, with respect, these documents show a clear pattern of developing immigration policies with explicit racial and ethnic motivations, while deliberately crafting public messaging to hide those motivations behind security concerns. She paused, then delivered her devastating question. So my question is simple, Mr. Miller. When you directed ICE and DHS to focus deportation and enforcement resources on specific communities rather than actual security threats, was it because you believed fewer immigrants from majority Black and brown countries would help Republicans politically? Or because you personally believed America should remain majority white? Or was it both? The silence that fell over the hearing room was absolute. Miller sat completely still, his mouth partially open, no words coming out. The question had done what countless interviews and hearings had failed to do for years. It had rendered Stephen Miller speechless. The question was crafted with devastating precision. To deny the premise would contradict the documentary evidence now displayed for all to see. To claim it was purely political would admit to using federal resources for partisan advantage. Potentially illegal. To acknowledge the racial motivation would confirm what critics had long alleged. There was no good answer. After several excruciating seconds of silence, Miller attempted to respond. That question contains multiple false premises and mischaracterizations that I categorically reject. But the damage was done. His typical fluency and confidence had evaporated. For the first time, the public was seeing a Stephen Miller without practiced talking points exposed by documentary evidence he couldn't explain away. Crockett pressed her advantage. Which specific premise do you reject, Mr. Miller? That you directed resources toward certain communities? That's documented in these enforcement priority memos. That you considered racial demographics? That's clear in your own handwritten notes. That you created a public narrative about security while privately discussing race? Your emails confirm exactly that. Miller's face had flushed deep red. This is a disgraceful attempt to smear policies that were lawfully implemented to protect American communities. The only thing disgraceful, Mr. Miller, Crockett responded calmly, is using the power of the federal government to target communities based on race while hiding behind false claims about national security. Chairman Jordan, recognizing the deteriorating situation for his witness, attempted to intervene. The gentlewoman's time has expired. I yield back, Crockett replied, knowing she had accomplished what she came to do. But the questioning had triggered chaos in the hearing room. Democratic members were calling for additional documents to be submitted to the record. Reporters were rushing out to file breaking stories. The Republican members huddled in urgent conversation, some looking visibly disturbed by the revelations, others strategizing damage control. Miller sat at the witness table, repeatedly sipping water, his hands visibly trembling. The composed, articulate defender of hardline immigration policies had been replaced by a rattled man confronted with his own words. As the chairman called a brief recess to restore order, cameras captured a remarkable moment. Congresswoman Crockett, gathering her documents, made brief eye contact with Miller across the room. No words were exchanged, but none were needed. In that silent moment, both knew that everything had changed. The question had been asked, the evidence had been revealed, and Stephen Miller had no answer. The impact of Congresswoman Crockett's questioning of Stephen Miller was immediate and seismic. As the hearing room doors opened following the recess, a flood of reporters rushed to file their stories. Within minutes, clips of the exchange began circulating on social media, accompanied by hashtags like Miller Exposed and Crockett Destroyed. Cable news networks quickly interrupted their regular programming with breaking news banners, Miller speechless, immigration architect confronted with racial motivation, evidence, and Crockett exposed Miller's secret immigration policy, documents revealed. As the hearing resumed, the dynamic had fundamentally shifted. Republican members, previously confident in their narrative about border security, now struggled to refocus the conversation. Several visibly distanced themselves from Miller, redirecting their questions to broader policy issues rather than defending the specific approaches now exposed as potentially racially motivated. Democratic members, emboldened by Crockett's breakthrough, built upon her questioning with new lines of inquiry. Congressman Raskin of Maryland followed up. Mr. Miller, given the documents Congresswoman Crockett has entered into the record, wouldn't you agree that the American people were deliberately misled about the true motivations behind these policies? Miller, attempting to regain his composure, responded defensively. What the American people understand is that we had a crisis at our border that required firm action. The selective presentation of partial documents doesn't change that reality, but his typically commanding presence had been shattered. His responses became shorter, less assured, and increasingly reliant on generalities rather than the specific, data-heavy arguments he'd deployed earlier. Outside the hearing room, reaction was spreading like wildfire. Civil rights organizations issued statements calling for investigations into potential violations of constitutional protections. Immigration advocacy groups highlighted how the revealed documents supported what they had long claimed about discriminatory enforcement. Historian, the White House press secretary, asked about the hearing during the daily briefing, responded, "The president believes our immigration system should reflect America's values of fairness and equal treatment under the law. The documents revealed today raise serious questions about whether those values were upheld in the previous administration." Social media platforms exploded with activity. The video clip of Crockett's question and Miller's stunned silence had been viewed over 2 million times within the first hour. Comment sections, filled with reactions ranging from shock to vindication, Finally, someone got Miller to show his true colors. Crockett came with receipts. No wonder he couldn't answer. 20 years covering politics, and I've never seen someone so completely exposed in real time. News analysis quickly moved beyond the dramatic moment to examine the broader implications. Legal experts appearing on panels discussed potential violations of equal protection principles. Political analysts debated how these revelations would impact ongoing immigration policy debates and upcoming elections. Former officials from the administration began damage control efforts, appearing on friendly media outlets to claim the documents were being taken out of context, but their defenses sounded hollow against the clear evidence now in the public domain. As the afternoon wore on, the hearing concluded with Chairman Jordan attempting to downplay the significance of the exchange. Today's hearing covered a wide range of important issues related to border security, and we thank Mr. Miller for his testimony on these critical matters, but no one was buying it. The story had already moved beyond his control. Miller himself left the Capitol through a side exit, ignoring shouted questions from assembled reporters. His spokesman issued a brief statement calling the hearing a partisan attempt to distract from the current administration's border failures, without addressing the specific documents or allegations. Back in her office, Congresswoman Crockett held an impromptu press conference surrounded by a crush of reporters and cameras. What we saw today wasn't just about Stephen Miller, she stated firmly. It was about transparency and accountability. For years, Americans were told these harsh policies were necessary for security, when documents now show they were designed with explicit racial considerations in mind. A reporter called out, "Congresswoman, how did your team find these documents when previous investigations missed them?" Crockett smiled slightly. "We connected dots that had been deliberately scattered across different agencies and communication channels. This wasn't accidental obfuscation. It was a strategy to hide the true intent of these policies." Another asked, "What happens next? Will there be calls for investigations?" "That's not just for Congress to decide," Crockett responded. "Now that the American people have seen the truth, I expect there will be demands for accountability from many quarters. What's important is that we never again allow such policies to be implemented under false pretenses." The ripple effects continued through the evening news cycles and beyond. Former administration officials were forced to respond to questions about their knowledge of the racial motivations behind policies they had defended or implemented. Several issued carefully worded statements distancing themselves from Miller. Immigration lawyers announced they would be reviewing past deportation cases for potential legal challenges based on the newly revealed evidence of discriminatory intent. Civil rights organizations called for a Department of Justice investigation. Political analysts noted that the revelations complicated Republican messaging on immigration ahead of upcoming elections. "They've lost the ability to claim these policies were purely about security or rule of law," one commentator noted. Congresswoman Crockett's questioning exposed the contradiction at the heart of the previous administration's approach. By nightfall, the major networks had assembled timeline graphics showing how public statements about security and rule of law had been made simultaneously with private discussions of racial demographics. Side-by-side comparisons of Miller's previous testimony with the newly revealed documents highlighted contradictions that couldn't easily be explained away. The human impact of the policies was brought into sharper focus as news programs interviewed families who had been separated or deported. Their stories gained new context with the understanding that these weren't just tough but necessary security measures. They had been implemented with demographic engineering in mind. On social media, Crockett question continued trending, with users creating memes of Miller's stunned silence. Political commentators from across the spectrum acknowledged the significance of the moment. In a single question, Representative Crockett fundamentally changed the immigration debate, wrote one prominent columnist. By exposing the gap between public justification and private motivation, she has forced Americans to confront uncomfortable truths about how policy is made and who it truly serves. Former colleagues praised Crockett's strategic approach. "She didn't grandstand or waste time on speeches," noted a fellow member of Congress. "She built her case methodically, presented irrefutable evidence, and asked the one question that couldn't be deflected with talking points." legal experts began assessing potential consequences beyond political fallout. If these documents show that federal resources were directed based on racial considerations rather than legitimate security threats, there could be serious legal implications, explained a constitutional law professor on an evening news panel. Equal protection concerns don't disappear just because they involve immigration enforcement. 3 days after the hearing, the story showed no signs of fading. Major newspapers published investigative pieces expanding on the documents Crockett had revealed, connecting them to specific enforcement actions and their impacts on communities across America. Editorial boards called for broader examinations of how racial considerations might have influenced other policy areas beyond immigration. Historians place the revelations in the context of America's long and complicated history with immigration and race. For Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, the hearing marked a defining moment in her political career. What had begun as meticulous preparation and strategic questioning had evolved into something much larger, a fundamental reassessment of an entire policy approach that had affected thousands of lives. In her district office the following week, Crockett reflected on the impact during a community meeting. Our system only works when those in power are honest about their intentions. What we exposed wasn't just about one man or one policy, it was about the right of the American people to know the true motivations behind decisions made in their name. The hearing had indeed changed everything. In-migration debates would never be quite the same, policy proposals would face greater scrutiny for hidden motivations, and Stephen Miller, once the confident, articulate defender of hardline approaches, would forever be remembered for the moment he had no answer to the one question that exposed everything. As for the documents themselves, they now resided in the permanent congressional record, ensuring that this chapter of American immigration policy would be remembered not just for what was done, but for the true reasons why, revealed in a single, unanswerable question from a freshman congresswoman who refused to accept the comfortable fiction over the uncomfortable truth. The story of how Jasmine Crockett destroyed Stephen Miller with one question he couldn't answer wasn't just about a dramatic congressional moment. It was about bringing truth to light and forcing America to confront realities too long hidden behind carefully crafted messaging. If you found this breakdown of political accountability valuable, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more in-depth analysis of the moments that shape our national conversation. The truth matters, and sometimes it takes just one perfect question to reveal it.